I am a nerd, and every nerd, of course, has their own personal favorite fandoms. I've already talked about one of my favorite fandoms, Kamen Rider Dragon Knight, and now I'm going to talk about another one, Yu-Gi-Oh! I watched and loved the original series as a kid, watched the first 1.5 seasons of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds because 4Kids is stupid. In fact, this isn't my only dual disc. There! Check out this sweet baby. Made it myself. It holds my cards that have protective sleeves on them. Anyway, naturally I've got quite a few Yu-Gi-Oh! Video games as well, and I'm going to review a few of them, starting with the first Yu-Gi-Oh! Game that I ever bought, Yu-Gi-Oh! The Sacred Cards. The story of the game pretty much follows the story of the Battle City tournament from the show. You play as a random unnamed duelist who happens to be good friends with Yugi and all of the show's protagonists. You enter the Battle City tournament hoping to become the best duelist around, and you set out to fight duelists and get locator cards so that you can enter the Battle City finals. But as the tournament goes on, you find that the tournament has been invaded by a cult of evil duelists called the Rare Hunters. Oh, I'm sorry, the Ghouls, because this game wasn't localized. Anyway, the Ghouls begin terrorizing duelists and stealing their cards, and they're led by an evil madman named Merrick, who wants to take over the world using the Egyptian god cards, which are imbued by magic beyond human comprehension. Being a powerful duelist, you and your friends get targeted by the Ghouls, so it's up to you to stop the Ghouls, find a way to save your friends, and win the Battle City tournament to make sure that Merrick doesn't plunge the world into eternal darkness. So yeah, basic RPG stuff. So, I'm just going to come out and say what my biggest problem with the game is. The gameplay has almost nothing to do with Yu-Gi-Oh! Sacred Cards fundamentally alters the rules of the card game and bastardizes it to the point that Sacred Cards just barely resembles the actual card game. And if you're buying a Yu-Gi-Oh! Game, it stands to reason that you're buying it because you want a port of the card game, not because you want an extremely dumbed-down imitation of the card game. Luckily, I made a list of everything that they changed from the regular card game, and heads up, this is going to take a while. Turns are no longer divided into phases. You can summon monsters, play cards, and attack in any order you please. You're only allowed 40 cards in your deck, no more. Each turn, you can give each of your monsters on the field one of 4 commands: attack, defend, sacrifice, and effect. You cannot do any combination of those things in one turn, which removes a lot of strategy, not to mention freedom, from the regular game. If you play a monster with an effect, you're only allowed to use that effect during the first turn that the monster is on the field. After that first turn, selecting the effect command does nothing. So why is it still an option when the command does nothing but waste a turn is anybody's guess. It's even an option for monsters that have no effect. That's just lazy programming. Most of the cards in the game have had their effects severely altered or removed altogether. For example, in real life, Jinzo disables all trap cards for as long as he's on the field. In this game, Jinzo can destroy all traps on the field, and we've established that this effect can only be used once. Not that it matters anyway, because about 90% of the duelists in this game don't even bother using traps. You're only allowed to have 5 cards in your hand at once. If you already have 5 cards in your hand, you will not draw at the beginning of your turn. This means that if you play correctly, there is no threat of you running out of cards, which is one of the ways that you can lose a duel. Actually, there's no threat of you running out of cards anyway, because duels in this game end really quickly, and there are no cards in the game that have players discard from their decks, so that's an entire group of strategies out the window. Once you place a trap card on the field, you have no control over when you activate it. Traps activate automatically when your opponent takes some action that triggers it. Also, have you heard of the trap card called False Trap? In the real game, you can activate False Trap to prevent one of your trap cards from being destroyed. In this game, the effect of False Trap is, and I quote, "This trap does nothing, it is intended to fool the opponent." Your opponent is going to attack whether you have a trap on the field or not. What is the point of including a card that does absolutely nothing and excusing it as intended to fool the opponent? And the sad thing is, I think most of the duelists in this game must use False Trap because there have been several occasions where an enemy has set multiple traps and I didn't set off any one of them. The game does not keep track of what cards are in either player's graveyard. The only thing the game keeps track of is the last monster that each player lost. Once a card goes to the graveyard, it is freaking gone! There is no such thing as a continuous, quick play, or equip spell card in this game. Every spell card has been edited into a normal spell and will open that can of worms later. Monsters can only be strengthened in multiples of 500 points, or they get a 30% power boost from a field power bonus. Your life points can't go above 9,999. Fusion monsters no longer exist. The fusion monsters from the regular card game have been turned into ritual or normal monsters. You can summon ritual monsters as if they were normal monsters, or you can summon them the old-fashioned way with a ritual spell. Except you can only use a ritual spell if you sacrifice one specific monster to use it. For example, in the regular card game, you can use the Black Illusion ritual card with any monster that you want to summon Relinquished. In this game, you can only use the Black Illusion ritual if you sacrifice a Thousand Eyes Idol. This typically means that you can't summon a monster with a ritual card unless you carry around a useless crap monster to use it with. And I'm only now getting to my biggest problem with the game's altered rules. Each monster in this game has one of 11 attributes. Each monster can immediately kill one attribute of monster and will immediately be killed by one attribute of monster. Doesn't matter what their attack points are, if one monster of a certain attribute battles another monster of a certain attribute, one monster will immediately drop dead. Earth monsters immediately kill thunder monsters immediately kill water monsters, water kills fire, fire kills forest, forest kills wind, wind kills earth, light kills fiend, shadow kills light, dream kills shadow, and fiend kills dream. Doesn't matter what attack strength they have, if your monster battles the wrong attribute, it just drops dead. Do you know what this is? This is random luck! You have no control over when your opponent will draw a monster of a type that can destroy your monsters automatically. Introducing random luck into the basic foundations of a strategy game has always been and always will be a horrible idea. A card that uses a coin toss or a dice roll is fine, it's the player's prerogative to use that card, but this is a rule that is wired into the game's core rules and gameplay. That's bullshit! This 10-way rock, paper, scissors system doesn't do anything to help you, it just means every now and then one of your monsters or one of your opponent's monsters is going to spontaneously die for no reason. It doesn't add anything to the gameplay except tremendously irritate you. I just don't get Konami's line of thinking here. I'm guessing that Konami dumbed down the game's rules so much because they wanted the game to appeal to a wider audience that doesn't feel like learning how to play Yu-Gi-Oh! But here's the thing, people that aren't interested in Yu-Gi-Oh! Probably aren't going to buy a Yu-Gi-Oh! Game in the first place, so it's pointless trying to appease them. Meanwhile, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Fans that were going to buy this game are going to be pissed because you took such a massive dump on the game that they like. There is no strategy to this game. You can't incorporate strategy into your deck because of the severely limited effects of the game's cards. The game is specifically designed for you to just stack your deck with the strongest monsters you can find and win, and that is such a bastardization of the involving and varied strategy game that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is. But, let's be fair to this game isn't trying to be a Yu-Gi-Oh! Game, it's trying to be a regular RPG with a card-based battle system, so let's stop judging it as a Yu-Gi-Oh! Game and let's judge this game as an RPG. Anyway, you start out with a POS deck that's full of lousy monsters with a couple hundred attack points each, but that's okay because the first locator card duelist you fight is Bones, and he has a POS deck that's full of even lousier monsters with a couple hundred less attack points each. And of course the game's duelists get incrementally stronger as you progress through the game, so before you can take on some more duelists and fight the next locator card duelist, Esparoba, you need to replace the POS cards in your deck with some stronger cards. That's where the game becomes a full-blown RPG. Your character has two stats, a skill level and a deck capacity, each of which increase every time that you win a duel. Every card has a cost written on it. If a card's cost is higher than your skill level, you're not allowed to use it. If the costs of all the cards in your deck sum up to a value higher than your deck capacity, you're not allowed to leave the deck editing screen. So before you can take on the next duelist in the game, you have to get some stronger cards in your deck. But to get those stronger cards, you need to increase your deck capacity, which means you need to run around fighting people until you've leveled up enough to proceed. This is what's known in RPG games as grinding, performing a repetitive task for an extended period of time for some kind of reward, in this case stronger cards so that you can go further into the game. The problem with sacred cards is that about 90% of the game is grinding. Let me elaborate. Let's say that you have a Mask of Darkness in your deck and you want to replace it with a monster that's marginally stronger, say, a baby dragon. The difference in cost between those two monsters is 49, so you need 49 extra deck capacity to make one card in your deck marginally better. There aren't a lot of useful spells or traps in the game, so there are probably 30 monsters in your deck. All of them need to be improved before you go to the next big duelist to proceed further into the game. 49 times 30 is 1,470, so ballpark estimate, before proceeding to the next big enemy at any given point in the game, you need to increase your deck capacity by 1,470. When you defeat a duelist, your skill level only increases by 5. 10 for those that give you locator cards. That means, to progress further into the game, you need to fight the locator card duelist that you've already defeated 147 times! The game gives you so little deck capacity when you win a duel that you need to fight over 100 duels to get leveled up enough to stand a chance against the next boss. And the grinding wouldn't be so bad if dueling in this game wasn't so damn monotonous. The vast majority of the duelists in this game do not use any spell or trap cards, or if they do, they don't use any good ones that are any threat to you. All they have are monsters, so dueling goes a little something like this. Your opponent plays a monster, you play a stronger monster and kill it. Keep summoning whatever is in your hand until your opponent is out of life points. That's it! That's all there is to dueling in this game. There's no strategy, you just play a good monster and have it smash everything in sight. And when you're grinding against the locator card duelists to get yourself leveled up, of course your monsters are all going to be far and away stronger than the duelists you're grinding with. You've leveled up since the first time you fought them. Your monsters can massacre every single card that they have. They don't stand a chance against you. And because you're only allowed to fight normal duelists once, these locator card duelists, the bosses that you've already beaten, that you can crush without even trying, they're the only people you can fight to get leveled up. So when you need to get powered up to fight the next boss, you have no choice but to revisit the bosses you've long since outgrown and fight them over and over and over and over. It's like if you were playing Pokemon and you had to go fight Giovanni, but you needed to level up your Pokemon first, and because there weren't any wild Pokemon or trainers you could fight, you had to fight Brock and Misty over and over again until you could fight Giovanni. And if you're thinking that you don't need to grind to beat an opponent and you could just fight your opponent using type matchups or field power bonuses to buff up your monsters, yeah, that's not gonna work. This isn't Pokemon, and most of the duelists in the game have more than one attribute of card in their deck, so going for type matchups is really not feasible. And as for the field spells, when you duel Weevil, you fight him on a forest field that gives all of his insect monsters a 30% power boost. I tried using a card called Yami to turn the field into a darkness field so that my spellcasters and fiends would get a power up instead of his bug monsters. And the very next turn after I played Yami, Weevil played a forest card and changed the field back to what it was. So field spells, not gonna help either. Leveling up until you can stack your deck with high attack monsters is the only thing that will help you progress through the game. You could get away with not powering up quite all of your monsters. I defeated the final boss with a few well-timed traps and spells when I didn't have any good cards, but you still need to power up the bulk of your monsters before going to the next duel or you won't stand a chance. And when I say there's no strategy to this game, I mean it. Many of the monsters in this game have no special effects, and the ones that do only let you power up a monster here or inflict some life point damage there, nothing that's a great help to you with a few exceptions. The effects are very limited and have no applications other than brute force. As for the spells, with a few exceptions, the only effects that spell cards have are destroy cards, power up monsters, weaken monsters, or affect life points. Those are largely the only things that any of the spells in this game can do. The game is specifically structured and the cards specifically tailored so that it is not possible to build a deck that does anything than attack with brute force. And do you want to know which card has the highest cost in this game? It's Labyrinth Wall, a monster with a high defense stat that literally has no other use other than being a good meat shield. Monsters that have high defense stats are all ridiculously expensive to put into your deck, all because the game is deathly afraid of you using any strategy other than Reagan Smash. Labyrinth Wall's cost is more than double the cost of Thousand Eyes Restrict, and Thousand Eyes Restrict is one of the best cards in the game. And deck building is a pain in the ass too, because the trunk where your cards are stored is so tedious to navigate. You can sort cards by their name or attack strength or whatever, but there's no way to search for cards or narrow them down. So if you want to find a card, like let's say Jinzo, you have to scroll through this list until you find it. Any day now. And by the way, how come cards that I don't have are listed in my inventory? That's just confusing! You basically progress through the game by tracking down and beating a series of bosses. You'll explore the handful of locations that are available to you dueling the random pedestrians, and eventually you'll hit a dead end where you've explored all of your locations and can't find any more duelists or access any new areas. You look around the locations and talk to whatever important characters you can find to figure out where you're supposed to go next. You go fight either a locator card duelist or one of the rare hunters. You basically just run around until you find the next boss you need to advance the game. There are 10 locations and each one is 4 to 8 screens screen's large, so the game world is not very big. What's worse is that the game's difficulty curve gets dramatically steeper as the game goes on. The first few bosses like Bones, Esperoba, and Rex Raptor don't require you to do a ton of grinding before you fight them, but the bosses that you encounter in the second half of the game like Mako, Loomis, and Kaiba are all so much more powerful than the last boss you fought that you need to do progressively more grinding before each fight if you don't want to get curb stomped. The game keeps screeching to a halt so you can spend a few hours leveling up for the next boss fight. I should also bring up that every time you duel somebody, you can wager one of your cards. If you lose that card, and if you win, you get one of your opponent's cards. However, the card that you wager has no correlation to the card that you get, so if you think that you could wager your ultra-rare 5-God Dragon and get an ultra-rare card in return, that's not gonna happen. After you've beaten up all of the rare hunters, Ishizu comes to find you and gives you Obelisk the Tormentor if you manage to defeat Kaiba in a duel. And by the way, Kaiba is one of the main characters from the show, and battling him for Obelisk the Tormentor is the only time you fight him in the entire game. Yugi, the protagonist of the show, you fight him once. He's the second to final boss and he gives you Slifer the Sky Dragon when you beat him. And Yugi sucks. He sucks hard. When I dueled him, he played a Celtic Guardian and 4 face-down cards his first turn. I slaughtered the Celtic Guardian because I was leveled up so high that he couldn't scratch any of my monsters, and I didn't set off any of his traps, and Yugi didn't play one single card after that. I whooped his ass! Yeah, anticlimactic much? I will say to this game's credit that it is pretty cool how the game lets you use Obelisk the Tormentor and Slifer the Sky Dragon. It even lets you put both in your deck at once, and they're both so overpowered that if you use their effects, they basically automatically win. It's awesome! At the end of the game, you duel Yami Merrick, and you get the final Egyptian god monster, the Winged Dragon of Ra, the most powerful of the Egyptian god cards. You finally have all 3, making you the most powerful duelist in the world, and you finally have the most powerful monster in the game at your beck and call. And then Ishizu comes and demands that you give her back the Egyptian god cards. No! I've been waiting all game to use Ra. I'm not giving him back to you. No! No! I said no! I will summon Obelisk the Tormentor and have him punch you in the soul, you ask me that again! I can do this all day. My Game Boy has plenty of batteries. Tell you what, I'll give you the Egyptian god cards back if you show me your knockers. Fine, take them. Just don't come crying to me next time the world is in trouble and I can't stop it because you took away my Egyptian god cards. Oh, and as for endgame content, there isn't any. The game doesn't save after the final boss fight, so all you can do at the end of the game is go fight the Merrick again or run around fighting the locator card duelist some more. Whoop-de-frickin-do. Yu-Gi-Oh! The Sacred Cards sucks. It's not a good Yu-Gi-Oh! Game because it completely butchers the game's rules, and it's not a good RPG because the combat is brain-dead basic and devoid of strategy, and you level up so slowly that you have to do an absurd amount of grinding before you can do anything. This is a 2-hour game that's at its content stretched out to about a 20-hour game by a few simple and annoying game decisions. The game is just dull, and I can't recommend that anybody play it. But next time I'll talk about a real Yu-Gi-Oh! Game, one that's actually modeled on the actual card game. Maybe that one will be good.